at kind of some basics of it. If you looked at the assignment, maybe you've already started the positive, negative assignment. That's great if you have. We're going to talk about perspective aspect. That's the 6B part, is perspective. We'll talk about that more on Friday. But today we're looking more at the positive, negative space. Maybe you've already started. Maybe you need some inspiration, some tips, some tricks, things to work with. Go ahead and create a artboard. It doesn't really necessarily matter exactly what size. If you want to choose a letter size, that's a piece of paper. That's fine. Once we've got our letter size piece of paper, we want to go ahead and work with creating some of our glyphs. So the assignment, if you looked at it, talks about using glyphs, which are typically a type of font. We think of glyphs as font. It doesn't have to be just a font, but it needs to be a glyph. Well, what is the difference? Well, I'll show you a way to kind of see it in a different light. Go ahead and hit a text box. I'm going to go ahead and start creating a nice big text box. And it's going to fill it with random text. Okay, that's wonderful. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the information in there. Then I'm going to go to Window, all the way down to Type. Under Type, I'm going to go to Glyphs. This is going to pull up the Glyphs menu. From the Glyphs menu, it will show me, based on the default font I have right now, is Myriad Pro. It'll show me all the glyphs with Myriad Pro. And there's some like Greek forms and other forms that go with the Myriad Pro. Most of these you might not want to use. You could, I suppose. You could bring in any of these shapes and forms and be able to create pieces with them. You can bring in any of these random forms. If I have a working text box open, I have it, the cursor is blinking, so I'm creating text. I can go ahead and click one, double click, and it puts it into that text box. So it's coming in as if it's a lettered font. So for my font family, it does make a difference in what glyphs I have available. That seems boring. I can only use letters? No. I'll show you a different way. If I go into, looks like letters, and they're mostly letter-looking shapes or Greek alphabets, which most of us don't speak Greek anymore. We're going to go ahead and select a different font. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to do Wingdings, or Webdings. Webdings is a form of font which you probably never really thought any purpose behind it until now. I can go ahead and put in my line. My cursor is blinking. And I can go ahead under Webdings, it went off my Webdings, and it shows all these shapes that are part of a glyph. A glyph makes up a font family. And I could go ahead and bring one in. Let's bring in some talking bubble or thinking bubble, or let's bring in, they have different things like a anonymous, or looks like an alien mask, or some money, or a guy working out, or a puppy dog, or whatever I want in my form there. So you can, what I recommend you do is you open up your glyphs, you find some glyphs using Wingdings or some other type of font, and there are plenty of them available. You use some type of interesting Chinese character, if you so speak Chinese, Mandarin, or whatever you speak. I have a great aunt who speaks fluent Mandarin. So she was actually a missionary in Hong Kong for 50 years. This is a single missionary. She grew up as a little kid. She was between 2 and 5. She was over there. So was my grandpa between 4 and 7. As a kid, as a missionary kid in China. So she learned it as a kid. So she learned it quite fluently. She doesn't have an accent, which is kind of cool. So all I have right now is several different glyphs on here. That seems kind of boring. They're kind of small. I'm going to select my glyphs. I select them all. You can drag them in several different ways. And let's make this move out of the way so it's not, there we go. And then I can go up to my font settings, and I can go ahead and choose a different size font. So that glyph, and we can say 72-point font, will get a certain size. So now I have one text box, multiple glyphs, which look like different shapes. Oop. And I can go ahead and click on that with my cursor, and I can start to delete the space or add space to it. At this point, I can make them bigger or smaller, just like I would a font, because it's treated as if it is a font, because it is essentially a font. I have all my forms in here, and they're editable fonts. The instructions go through this as well, but I want to make clear, right now this is a font. If I don't have this particular font on my computer when I grade it, which back home or back in my office I may not have the particular font you're using, I may, it will substitute those fonts. So if you have this cool looking guy lifting weights or a dog, and I don't have that particular Wingdings font, it will substitute with probably some random character.
Is this where converting it into vector art comes in?
Aha, yes. So this is a vector. A font is a vector. It can be resized bigger or smaller, no quality loss. It's not pixel-based, otherwise called raster images. But I can then take my font text box, which is treated as font, vector, go to type, go to convert, create outlines, and it will take my text, and it will no longer be editable text. If I want to use this late in the future, maybe as editable text, what I recommend you do is you copy a version over. If you hold Alt and drag, it creates a copy, or you can do Control-C and Control-V. There's multiple ways to go to copy. So now I have my editable text off to the side. It's not in the artboard, but more in the pasteboard. Come up with my form, go to my type, create my outlines, and now it has here, they all group together. I could ungroup them if I want. Now each piece is individually its own editable vector-shaped glyph. And because it's a glyph, it's still, it is vectorized, it's still, I can make it bigger or smaller, so I don't have to do it through the proportions of typing in a font size. It is now working as if it is created with points from like a pen tool or something like that. So from this point, you can go ahead and you can modify it a little bit, erase portions or whatever, and tweak things. But the idea is I don't want you using like squares and boxes and geometric shapes for this assignment. It's going to push you a little bit. You can find all these different levels and shapes and letters and glyphs of all kinds of purposes, and then layer them together to make a looking character if you wanted, a letter. But you're going to be using any glyphs. You can search through all your fonts for your certain glyphs, forms, shapes, to create your positive, negative space. Now, if you also look at the instructions, it gives you the idea of you can use black and white. Technically, you could use black in a different color and use white as just the blank artboard. So if you want to use black and yellow, black and green, black and blue, that's fine. But then your only other color would be just the absence of anything, the white artboard. So just limit it down to 2 colors. I recommend you go and right away just create your 2 colors. Go ahead and select your color forms. Delete out all your, I don't want to delete that. Delete all my color swatches down to just 2 colors, black and purple or something like that. If those are the 2 colors you want. You can't get confused by this little guy. It's not going to become black. Purple. Yes, Matt.
On that, how do you give back color swatches that? Because like I opened up my Illustrator one day, and it like none of my colors.
By default, when you create a new document, there was only black and white.
Yeah, it was just black and white.
That's weird. I would just create a new document because the default you should have a number of pieces by default. If you just create a new document, it should come back. And it's still only giving you those? Interesting. Yeah. With the live bucket, you're supposed to limit down just to the ones you use instead of have the dozens here. I've never noticed it has different ones. You can go ahead and create different ones, or you can also just import a library. You can go up to your library and you can import a chunk, and it would give you sections of tones. You can import a library, then it would become on that document part of your swatches in the document. So if you import your library, you could do it that way. If it didn't come out that way by default. Good question. We've got your glyphs. That could be any looking shape. It doesn't have to be even a particular letter. It could be a Greek letter. It could be a funny characteristic. And the way you use multiple of these, you'll probably find a number of glyphs, find the ones that are interesting, and then start to layer them and start to play with that effect. Positive, negative space. You can start to do, in this instance, if we had just purple and white as my colors, I could do some interesting binding of those colors. Ooh. Okay, I had everything selected. I'm not sure how that did it that way. It's not what I thought I was going to do it. Just the color. It doesn't be like a whole piece. Oh, I see. There's multiple pieces there. That's the top layer. I don't want that layer there. So I want to have just the dog layer, just the dog. Put the dog in the front. Do it that way. I could have some interesting combination. You can start to create interesting negative plates by starting to have 2 shapes here. There's just this dog and this bubble. If there's multiple shapes, it'll choose the top one as your shape. Right click, clipping mask, and I start to have where now the purple goes away, but it's kind of got this outline in this box. First, release that clipping mask and go further. They start to have that ability to do some interesting things. That's positive negative space. You want to kind of have it cut out. reduce. Where'd my dog go? Start to have that positive negative interplay. So there's lots of options. We get into positive negative space. It's not necessarily a logo design. You could do an interesting logo or something kind of creative where it's that ambiguous. The open space or what's front, what's back. Using like Subway and some of the other famous logos with that have that positive negative interplay, which was kind of interesting that we looked at. Questions so far? This is being recorded, so I can put it up in the resource video so you can watch it if you get stuck in the future, which is fine. Oh, go ahead, James.
If we get like one of those little
Yep.
does that mean that
Say it one more time.
I have like one of those little
Yep, it means your text box is too small. So if you make the text box larger, the glyph is too big to fit in that box. So just enlarge your text box and it'll show up. Another technique that we haven't got into much detail. Wow, that's actually a red guy. It doesn't look red at all on the projector. It looks almost, it's nasty. We need a new projector. We're looking at maybe getting some TVs by next year for like smart TVs and have a really nice quality, but right now it doesn't look very good. So if you go into the effects panel, that's another thing I wanted to cover today. You go into your effects, and there's different techniques, blurring, pixelating, creating different styles to go along with that. So you can take a glyph, make it a shape, make it a letter, make it a form, and you can start to play with the style to kind of give it some edges, kind of give it a blockiness feel. Options you can go into your effects and do some interesting filters with. And you create. If you have effect, it'll show up in this effect here. You can stylize your effects in many different ways. Do a blur tool. Blur. Now it's taken that vector shape and it started to blur it. So you're welcome to use some of the different special effects. Either take it through the effects button in your appearance, or you can go up to effect and you can choose many of these different effects and it will change its look, its style, which could be helpful for that positive negative space kind of ambiguous feel. Any other questions on this section? We'll get to that in just as James is about this or something else you have struggling with the problem.
about the first part.
As long as it fits in the box, it should be fine. As long as it's fitting in that text box. If the text box isn't usually larger to make it fit, that could become part of your problem. And I can help you a little bit when I'm done with this video. So under your appearance tab, we have the ability, of course, to do our fill and our stroke. We've worked with fill and strokes. You can add strokes. Just remember, you can only have two colors. Your white or black, or your black and an alternative color. So you can't have more than two colors for the assignment. You can play with your opacity. That's fine. Positive, negative space. Sometimes it helps to have maybe at 50% opacity. You want to make it so it's 50% see-through. That's fine. That gives you a very different look. We're still using just a red color. It's 50% see-through. It doesn't look very different. So you can play with opacities or transparencies. You can play with what we call blending modes. If I click opacity, it'll pop up with a blending mode. And a blending mode is great for, on a red and black, it's probably not going to look that different. But certain colors, your blending mode will make it look very different. They merge the colors together. Right now it's not doing much at all on this particular one. But certain colors, certain overlays, brights or darks, if you go into your opacity settings, double click opacity, you can start to play with blending modes, which help it to mix, to blend, which sometimes it gives you that more ambiguous, where it's kind of like, is it bright or is it dark? It's kind of combining with my white and my black. That can create some very interesting, fun, easy on the eyes, or delightful, tickle your senses with that positive, negative space interplay. So your appearance menu has not just the effects, it also has the ability for opacity in many different settings inside of that option as well. And I'll show you even another deeper level. If you have multiple shapes selected, you can go into. I have multiple shapes selected. I have the little puppy, and this bubble, and the weightlifter dude. You can go into your Pathfinder, and you can find different ways that will combine your pieces. Like this. Let me go to undo that. I can combine them and kind of links them all together. So I've overlaid these different pieces. I can link them together. It actually now creates one piece out of the 3 pieces that were there. Or I have them selected. I come up here and I can do subtracting options. And so, back it up a notch. I'm actually going to cut out part of that piece. So a different way to blend your different pieces. So you want part of that to disappear. That did interesting. It just kept like the feet of the dog. Not quite what I wanted to do. Or I can play with some of these blending modes, and it'll start to create these different positive, negative space interplay. So now it is now one piece. Instead of being 3 pieces, all one piece. I can ungroup it, and I can have part of these things as different groups, because it's kind of broken it up into multiple pieces now. But using your Pathfinder is a good way to combine or to merge or to shape different aspects in there.